what are some other things that eventually you think this will be used for? I heard you talk about the fact that some people have been implanted, to help with opioid use, or, can this help with Alzheimer's one day?
They're studying depression, treatment resistant depression. They're studying OCD. They're studying addiction to alcohol and opioids. I mean, a lot of these issues, you could say they're biochemical. You can also say they're electrical.
Right.
You can kind of attack them from different ways, but in some cases, you might look at a patient and say, well, by giving them all of these drugs, we're sort of carpet bombing the brain
Yeah.
and causing all of these awful side effects. If we target just the neurons at an electrical level and get the same outcome, but without all of the pharmacological side effects, and that's a good thing. But so we're still in the early stages. I have no idea as a non-scientist, just BCI enthusiast and science communicator, kind of what the outcomes will be of these studies. But I think that we'll see a lot of really fascinating things in the next 10 years.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like it. But, this is kind of what they make these scary movies about, right? So we can see
Mhm.
ourselves in the future getting implanted with stuff in our brain just to help with something as simple, not being paralyzed. And when I say simple, I shouldn't say it like that, but, as an opioid addiction. So back to my other question before, like, when do we think that this becomes a problem that all of a sudden a hacker could get in and change people's minds, and where it can affect things like an election? It can affect things like overturning things, or, when does it get dangerous?
Yeah, I mean, we already have a huge problem in being able to decipher reality.
Yeah.
This is I'm so scared about what's to come this year with AI. And I work with these tools every single day, and I get so excited by them, and they give me so much wonder and awe, and they will absolutely be used for nefarious, evil purposes, and it's really, really frightening.
Yeah.
So I can see why anyone would be terrified about the idea of implanting something in your brain that could potentially be hacked. So at the moment, these are closed loop systems at universities, and the technology requires you to actually be inside a lab, and a patient has to actually be thinking about moving a part of their body to even decode the neural activity. So let's say a patient just has a thought about what they're going to eat for dinner that night. Like, there's no access to that thought. There's no ability to decode that thought. There's no ability to implant something in the brain outside of this sort of motor part of the body. That doesn't mean that there's not some potential as these devices become more sophisticated and maybe are implanted in other parts of the brain where these possibilities aren't real. But right now, the limitations of the science just posit that it's not actually possible to do the kinds of things that we imagine in sci-fi films.
Right.
Um, and also thoughts are a lot of we don't really even understand how our thoughts are created. Like, there's so many different neural networks in the brain that are talking and communicating to each other, uh, that things like motor and sensory we're sort of lucky that those are taking place in highly specific areas of the brain that can be targeted, whereas like our general critical thinking and all of that, it's much tougher to determine how that'll be affected by these technologies. I mean, are you
Right.
scared? What do you think about it?
Well, I think it's really interesting. I've been to a conference on it, and it was about the negative and the positive. It was hosted by the guys who did the social dilemma. And one
Mm,
of the guys was talking about how dangerous it is. And he was asking for
just talking.
donations. And somebody that we were with actually donated $1 million that day to help him and his group, combat what's going to happen with AI, and to really get the message out that how dangerous it is. And he was showing examples of how dangerous it could be, which gets me to something, Netflix just put out a reality show. I don't know if you're familiar with this, and I'm going to blank on the name because it was a European reality show, and it was like five couples that were split up and went into two different houses, and it was to see whether or not they would cheat. And then they were presented with photos and videos of their significant other cheating, and they were devastated watching this. And you're devastated, you're like, oh my god, this is terrible. And then they're posed with the question, is this your significant other, or is this AI? And they had created, some of it was fake, but the images that were created looked exactly like them, and the movements and everything. So it went on and on for 2 weeks or whatever. And you had to see these devastating videos, and people were sobbing, people are angry. And then they get put together at the end, and they have to decide if they really, if their significant other cheated or they didn't. And if they believed, the trust level. Every one of the couples broke up because they didn't believe it. And whether or not, the host said, okay, well, it was just AI, it was completely fake. They said the other person would get mad. Well, you didn't trust me. And, and no one trusted each other. And the use of AI was so good.